Greetings! In mid-May, The Guardian published a list of what they called the 100 best novels, the greatest literature ever published in English, as voted for by authors, critics and academics worldwide. How do you react to this? Do you think clickbait, hyperbole, a provocation? Because those were all among my reactions. The list is interactive in the sense that you, the reader, can click on each of the 100 titles to register that you have read it. The page will then sum up your total and give you a link to share and to promote The Guardian. The Guardian published its list over a week ago as I record this, and I have been working my way through the list of books and also through the back end, so the lists of books that were nominated for the 100 best, and it's been fascinating. But first, let me say that yes, I took the challenge. I went through the list. I ticked all the books that I had read, and we'll talk about that a bit later in the video. But as I worked through the list, I kept coming back to these questions. Does this list actually say anything about greatness in writing? Are these titles really the best? Who says? What do they mean by best anyway? So that's what this video is going to be about, and if you want to check out the list yourself or reread it, then there's a link in the description. Perhaps The Guardian's list of 100 best novels of all time aims to focus the attention of readers on classics, because there are a lot of classics in this list. This list is definitely not an introduction to reading, and I think that some people may come to it thinking, I want to read more, these are the books that everybody says are the best and that will help expand my reading. Maybe, but I think this actually is a list for book reading nerds, people who are already readers and who have an opinion on many of these books, who, like me, go through the list and say, yeah, I've read that. Oh, I haven't read that one yet. But yet being the operative word. Or perhaps this list is intended to stir people up, to get them talking about books, which is no bad thing, and to encourage people like me to pontificate. So who chose these 100 best novels of all time? Authors, critics and academics, says The Guardian, quietly forgetting all the journalists, Guardian journalists, many of them, or absorbing them into the other categories. I don't want to be mean. There's going to be an overlap. It's hard to make a living purely as an author, and there are many academics and many journalists who are also published authors, and many more, I am sure, academics and journalists who aspire to being published authors. Bear in mind, Tolkien was an academic, and George Orwell earned much of his living as a journalist. The Guardian says, we polled 172 authors, critics and academics for their top 10 novels of all time published in English. Among the 172, there's Stephen King, there's Salman Rushdie, there's Maggie O'Farrell, there's Ian Rankin. And among the people who aren't authors, I see Jack Edwards, who is a YouTuber. I noticed that he's the only person who is a YouTuber who talks about books. I'm sure there are more that they could have picked on, but anyway, one is good, I suppose. We polled 172 authors and critics. I do wonder, did they only poll 172, or did they in fact poll many more, and this is just 172 who actually responded? That seems to me more likely. Academics and critics for their top 10 novels of all time, and then we asked them to rank their choices in order of preference. And then what they did was to take all the titles that had been nominated, sort them in terms of how often they came up and where they were placed in the different top 10 lists, and then produce the list out of that. So this business about the greatest literature ever published, voted for by authors, critics and academics worldwide. Yes, they are from around the world, but there's only 172 of them. How do you define novel? Well, of course it means new, doesn't it? So anything which is a way of presenting fiction which is new is one definition of novel. Another definition of novel is the common sense one, which is it's a story. The definition of novel that seems to be applied within this 100 best novels list is broad. It encompasses novellas like Kafka's The Metamorphosis. It encompasses what I believe are called hybrids, like W.G. Sebald's Rings of Saturn. It's a memoir, a travel book, a book of history and anecdote. Maybe it's fiction. Hybrid. There's also experimental work like Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, which I personally was very pleased to see. The Guardian, bless them, have published all the lists of all the different authors, and you can go in and you can look at who has voted for what, who has nominated what, and among the nominations you can see that the definition of novel has been stretched. I saw, for example, no less than 3 people voting for The Tale of Genji. It's a Japanese book. It was written in the 11th century, but it has a novelistic structure. There were 2 votes for 1001 Nights, which is a book of short stories, but there is an overarching structure to it, that Scheherazade is telling these stories to save her life every night for 1001. There were 5 votes for Annie Ernaux's memoir, The Years, and I know that Annie Ernaux writes in a grey area between memoir and fiction. I'm not sure that she would describe what she does as fiction, but okay, maybe it falls into the category in some way. 1 vote went to Derek Walcott, Homeros. It is an epic poem. It's based on Odysseus by Homer, in the same way that James Joyce's Ulysses is based on Odysseus by Homer. But it's a poem. Does it count as a novel? It has been described as a novel, I know that. Somebody else voted for Dylan Thomas's Under Milk Wood, which is definitely a poem and very probably a radio play script. I've heard it performed as a radio play, which is why I'm thinking it in those terms. 1 vote for that. Somebody voted for Dante's Divine Comedy, which is an epic poem. The same author, in fact, also nominated Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and the Rig Veda, neither of which I personally would think of as novels, but, you know, I haven't read Rig Veda. One thing to be said, I think, is that this is not a canon. I don't think the Guardian would be delighted to believe that they were producing a canon. What they've done is they've got a list here which their voting base, active writers, academic critics, regard as the best, however they define that. And the list in itself stands as a counterpoint to other lists, of which there are many online, but also an interesting comparison statistically to look at previous lists produced in a similar manner. And it's interesting to therefore go back and look at those lists and compare what was considered to be the best 100 novels in the English language 20 years ago. The Guardian itself writes, the most striking difference is an increase in female writers. 36 out of 100 in the present list, compared with 16 out of 100 in 2003. 36 out of 100. It's still not 50-50, is it? Let's get into my personal reactions, shall we? I have read 63 or 64 of the titles. At least I think I have read 63 or 64. What happened was that when the list arrived in my tablet, I went through and I clicked off all the books that I'd read, and then the following day I was in my computer and I did the same thing, and the results were different. There are books in the list which I am actually not sure whether, I know I've started them, but I'm not sure whether I've finished them. The one that I have struggled with and that I know I have never finished is Ulysses. Tried it multiple times, never got beyond the first 100 pages. It's not that the book is impenetrable. I would say of James Joyce's books, Finnegan's Wake is the book that I would call impenetrable. But Ulysses is difficult, and I just, it didn't appeal. I didn't get into it. If I was going to recommend anyone to read a book by James Joyce, I would recommend The Dubliners. which is a book of short stories and is very good. And if you don't like short stories, then how about A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is also very good. Much easier to read, and I wouldn't start with Ulysses. A second book that I have read but not finished is War and Peace. I've read the whole of the novel right through until Tolstoy's last few chapters, when he starts to go into historical theory, and it lost me completely. I read it when I was 14, so it was over my head. Maybe I should try and read it again. I just haven't felt that I needed to. But anyway, I gave myself that book. Another book was Frankenstein. I am pretty sure I've read it, but I can't remember whether I got to the end of that. But I gave it to myself because I have read it. And then there's The Golden Bowl, but I'm going to talk about The Golden Bowl and Henry James a little bit later. Let's say something about the books I was pleased to see in the list. I was delighted to see Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. I would have been equally pleased to see The Dispossessed or A Wizard of Earthsea. And indeed, both of those titles are ones that were nominated but didn't make the top 100. I'm very pleased about The Left Hand of Darkness because it's a book that I very much enjoyed, and there was a period in my life when I read it every winter. Other highlights for me, well, I've mentioned Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. I read that for the first time, I think, 6-7 years ago, and I've reread it at least once all the way through, but it's a book that I've very much enjoyed dipping into. I've even tried writing about Invisible Cities in the style of Italo Calvino. It's a very meditative book, I think. Other books, The Handmaid's Tale. I'm very pleased to see that. I enjoyed the book. I read it before the TV series. I read it after the TV series. I think the TV series was very good. I reread it after the TV series. I'm not sure I would call it the best of her books. I think I would vote for The Blind Assassin, Oryx and Crake, perhaps. The book I go back to, a very thin book, is called Good Bones, and it's a collection of what we now would call flash fiction, which I very much enjoy. Margaret Atwood, I recommend it. What else? Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. Now, I know The Remains of the Day is an absolutely knockout novel, and I'm very pleased to see that in the list. But Never Let Me Go, it pulled on my heartstrings, and it appealed to the science fiction nerd in me, and I really enjoyed it, and I was very pleased to see it crop up in this list. And also I was very pleased to see Octavia Butler's Kindred, which I think there's been a resurgence of interest in Octavia Butler as a science fiction writer, and that is delightful. Another book I was pleased to see was The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. I mean, come on, a 6-foot-tall black satanic cat walking on its hind legs around Moscow just post the revolution. What's not to like? One of the books that I thought, I wonder if, but wasn't there, was Tove Jansson's The Summer Book, originally Swedish. It was translated into English twice, I think. It's a book of short stories, but they're arranged in a very novelistic structure. So there is a clear progression through the stories. They link to one another. I think it's a beautifully written book and beautifully portrayed. The archipelago outside Helsinki is beautifully portrayed. I did find it, actually. It was among the 1,720 odd titles that were nominated for this, and one of the people who nominated it was Ali Smith. Coming back to Henry James, The Golden Bowl. I had to read The Golden Bowl at university when I was studying American literature. I think it was American literature. And I did not enjoy it. In fact, the only thing I remember about it is that I did not enjoy it. I know that I got through it. I know that I read it to the end, and in all probability, I wrote an essay on it, but it's completely gone from my memory. Not a happy experience. There are two other books by Henry James in this list. One is The Portrait of a Lady, which I have also read at university as a student, and which I have no problems with. I think that I enjoyed that. I don't remember much about it, but I think I enjoyed it. But the book that I really like of James, that is included in this list, is The Turn of the Screw, which is a novella, or it's a short novel, and it is a psychological thriller, and maybe it's a ghost story. And it's a book that I picked up and read voluntarily, picked it up and read it myself. And I have read it at least 3 times in my life at different stages. And I will undoubtedly read it again. I really enjoyed that. So I would recommend that as the best of Henry James, as an entry level to readers. So tell me, have you seen The Guardian's list? Have you read it? Have you gone through it and picked out all the books that you have read? How many? Are you tempted to read any more? Personally, I would very much recommend going behind the scenes and looking at the lists of nominated books by the different writers, because some of them have quite extensive explanations about why they've chosen this book or that. It's interesting, especially to go and find an author that you know and admire and look at the books that they have chosen. What about you? What do you think is the value of this list or other lists? And what titles are missing, in your opinion, from this list? What titles are you delighted to see? You can write to The Guardian and tell them. They even offer you the option to send them your 3 best novels. Or you can write a comment under this video. I'd be interested to read it. But for now, I think I've got to the end. So I will say thank you and cheerio until the next video. Bye-bye.